We have a major creative battle, okay? Do we create for ourselves or do we create for our audience? Moose sent me this clip from Rick Rubin, who, if y'all don't know, is better known for being the co-founder of Def Jam, right? And he wrote a book recently, and he said something that is completely the opposite of what we've ever said on this podcast.
One of the things I say in the book is the audience comes last. And the audience comes last, not because I don't care about them or I don't like the audience. In service to the audience, they have to come last. Yeah. The thing that the audience wants is the best thing they can get. If we're trying to make it for them, it won't be the best thing it can get. It'll water it down. The process of making something for someone else undermines it.
I can't help but to say that Static hit his hair. Go watch the video version if you're just listening to this, because that completely distracted me just now. However, I listened to this. We talked shortly about it last week, and it made me think, like, yo, this is a topic. This is an honest topic, because there is pros and cons to both. There's pros to going what you want. Create what you want. Like, whether it's product, services, content, create what you want. And then the audience will come. But then there are, then you got to look at it from create for yourself, create for yourself and create for your audience. There's pros and cons on both of them. My thing is, what is the best one in order to grow a successful brand and business? So, Moose, I would love your take on, from the clip side, from his hair side. No, from the clip side. And kind of like what your thoughts are as far as pros and cons from both.
Yeah, I mean, so it's just for context, right? I was first really drawn to the clip because Elon Musk retweeted the clip, a version of it. And I think the one that he retweeted was from an interview with Lewis Howes on his podcast. But he was essentially, Rick Rubin was saying the same thing. And Elon retweeted it and said, this is exactly how Tesla was born. I said, wait a second. That's, it gives another layer of credibility, because that's him saying, I created this crazy car brand with a similar philosophy of not for the people, but for myself, in a sense. So I thought about it a little bit deeper. Now, before I formulated an opinion, and I need to do this more often, quite honestly, just to keep myself accountable, I went to listen to the full context of the interview. I was like, all right, what else are you talking about, Rick? Mm-hmm. Like, give me some more context here. And the conversation was really about how artists are so attached to other people's opinion and what they're going to think about the art, that the art becomes watered down. And essentially artists, creators, right? It's a very similar world, mm-hmm. whether they're doing it from, entertainment or music, and creators are doing it online using social media for similar purposes. Essentially, it's the same thing. But he was saying, if you're so attached to other people's opinion, then you're not really doing your art. You're doing what people want, right? So it's not in that favor. And he broke it down pretty well there in that video. For me, I have to say, I am a pretty selfish person when it comes to creative expression, right? And that's just because I've learned that when I am too attached to doing something just for, whether it be the vanity metrics, and I'm super honest with myself, like I really can check myself and say, you're really moving for the satisfaction of other people right now. I can be brutally honest with myself. Like I know the difference of when I'm doing something and what's the intent behind it. Mm-hmm. And that's not something I've ever appreciated. So anytime I've had these long hiatuses from social, at least in the past, it's because I have seen myself go down this rabbit hole for a long time, move in a way that's not most authentic to me. And it creates this drift, essentially, from what I know is my purpose or what I'm supposed to be doing, right? Mm-hmm. So I've almost made this pact where if it ever becomes that, I'm just going to stop. Like, I don't want to build my brand or the businesses that I'm a part of to be so attached to the content portion of it, at least online, on a continual, consistent, ongoing basis, that I have to go against my well-being to keep the content going. That's just my personal opinion. So I favor that line of thought, not for the same reason per se, but for something similar, right? Mm-hmm. Now, I think there are different phases to it, right? And I'm definitely curious your take on it. But if you think about it, as a creator, and one of the other points that he mentioned too that I thought was really dope is he says, you should not look to get paid from your art, at least not right away. That's another one of those things that waters it down. And of course, I thought about, man, like that's what happens when brands, personal brands try to monetize prematurely. It's the same essence, right? Yeah. You go away from the thing that attracted the audience or people fell in love with you for, because you're now thinking about, well, is that going to sell? Or how is that going to convert? Or, but I need to make this amount of dollars, or I want this. So it's a completely different momentum shift. So one of the other things that he was talking about is like, hey, just go get a job. Keep them separate, at least until you know that this is absolutely what you want to do. So I love that thought process. Maybe we could talk about it a little bit later. But the way I see it from a logical perspective, at least how my natural brain thinks, in the beginning, yes, be selfish in your creative process because you want to articulate the best of what your experience is, what your story and what your perspective is. You need to do that. And so if you start to make it too much about other people, it's not really your perspective anymore. And of course, we've talked about that no one is self-made or no idea is truly original, but your experience and your story, it's probably the most original thing that you have. So the minute that you start blending it or changing it to fit other people's opinion, it loses its originality in a major way. Now, when you start talking about the business side, Nix, as you fast forward and start going through that, sure, maybe a purely innovative business idea, it's nice that it's for you. But as your product begins to develop and go through different versions of iterations, it absolutely has to have the audience's feedback in it.
Right.
So that's where one of those, this was a great thing to do at one point in my journey, it can start to hold you back because you're still creating things for yourself, but you got millions of people, like in the case of Tesla, you have millions of people driving your cars. Why would you not use their feedback? Because I know if you're not using their feedback, at least from an opinion standpoint, you're definitely using the data around how the car performs, right? So that's still user feedback. You need the feedback of your customers or the people who are engaging with your product or service to make it better. So that's where I draw the line between, yes, be selfish.
Yeah.
And then you have to draw away from that, at some point, so that from a business standpoint, you can make iterations to your product or service that meet the needs of the consumer or the people who are using it.
Yeah, I'm torn with this one, just because there are so many pros and cons to both, right? So one that always sticks out to me and is close to me is the burnout situation. Meaning, like, if you are only creating for others, it's going to create some type of burnout, whether it's like depletion burnout or like alignment burnout, right? Where depletion is because you've just given yourself like little breaks, always concerned about others. There's no longer any type of energy, and you haven't really figured out to recharge because you're always serving, right?
Yeah.
But then the alignment burnout is more of that you are creating a space that is not why you started. So your purpose isn't always what the people want, like exactly what they want, but you're continuously creating based off, whether it's the platforms or the people, right? So the burnout side is real, that I'm like, okay, I hear you. Now, of course, the pros of creating for your audience, it's like you get a loyal fan base. You get a loyal customer base, right? It immediately creates engagement. It immediately creates conversions, right? It immediately connects with an existing interest or demand. Pros. Cons. Now we're talking about you have a creative limitation, because what you may want to create is not going to be necessarily the same as your audience. You have the risk of chasing trends, right? Just to continuously to stay in front of people in the way they want it. You start to feel a little bit inauthentic because you can't necessarily be your true self and cater to everybody. It's not necessarily possible, right? Now, we can talk about the pros for creating for yourself, right? Which allows passion. This allows personal expression. This allows freedom to experiment and the potential for unique content. These are all amazing pros. But when we're talking about the cons, this may take longer to find your audience.
Yeah.
Right? And so you're whole, you're good, you love creating, but then you're wondering, why is no one clicking the link? Why are they not following? Why is no one really knowing my brand? And so with that, it could also create the risk of less immediate engagement. It also, from a personal side, can create self-doubt. Because you're creating for yourself, but then no one's really reacting to it. No one's moving towards it. And so then you're going, does this really work? Right? And you low key need that external validation. Yeah. So, I look at those pros and cons and I'm like, okay, give me a happy medium. I mean, like, give me a happy medium, because both of them sound trash. Both of them sounds trasho. I'm not here for either or, right? So for me, I've always created what I wanted, but with the mindset of serving others.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I could be honest, as far as in the beginning, I was solely creating for others that some people just didn't really know who I was. So though I'm very authentic, that's how I am and how I create the content and things like that. Even though it's more of a serving side, I don't lose my authenticity in it, but then I almost lose the true connection from a public standpoint. When you're in deeper than the brand, you get to know me a little bit more, things like that. But from a public standpoint, now I've become a source and not a person.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I'm on here like in this, like probably like mid last year and definitely this year now, I'm going more into like coming out more as the person. that knows a lot of stuff. You feel me?